Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Mills Patrick. Welcome to another episode of the Funding Simplified series where I simplify the business funding process, whether that's getting debt, getting loans from banks and other institutions, or working with investors by giving up equity in your startup or existing business. This week is all about investing, getting loans to invest in speculative activities. Now, what I mean by that, that means things that you're not entirely sure that they're going to work is one of the ways that lenders look at this. So for today's topic, we're talking about speculative investing in real estate, particularly buying rental properties and holding them. Today, I'm not talking about flipping them, buying properties, adding value to them, turning around and flipping them for a profit. I'm really talking more about the idea of buying a rental property, putting a tenant in it, whether it's commercial or residential, putting a tenant in it, and then collecting rent on and recouping your return that way. One of the big things to understand about that type of loan, a loan to do that type of activity, is that when the lender looks at it, they're going to want to understand if this is what's called an owner-occupied property or a non-owner-occupied property. And some of my materials, you'll see those abbreviated OO for owner-occupied versus NOO for non-owner-occupied. So what's the difference between the two? Well, the difference is you are considered a non-owner occupied property when you lease out 51% of the square footage of that building. So easy math for all of us. You've got 1,000 square foot facility. You lease out 600 square feet of it to someone else, but your business is in 400 square feet of that. That is considered a non-owner occupied property. Hopefully you thought that through and got the answer correct. If the flip side of that is true, where you lease out 600 square feet of those 1,000, but I'm sorry, you occupy 600 square feet of that 1,000 square feet, but you lease out 400 square feet, then that is considered an owner-occupied building. Of course, all the way up to if you're going to occupy 100% of the space yourself, it's your building. The main reason that matters to the lender is the percentage of a loan that they'll give you. So what lenders do, if you're buying a $100,000 building, and it's going to be owner-occupied, most lenders will lend to you more funds against that purchase. And what I mean by that is, let's just call an average percentage 80%. So if the building is $100,000 in value based on the appraisal, they're going to lend to you 80% of that, which means they'll give you $80,000 toward that purchase. You'll have to put $20,000 in cash in. There's some ways around that percentage down where you can use SBA loans. That's not for today's conversation, but there are ways to minimize the amount you'll have to put down. I will caution you and say that it's not likely that you're going to get a 100% loan. There are a few instances where you can do that through hard money lenders. Talked about that previous on the podcast, and some other lenders, but most likely you're going to have to put some cash into the deal, and on average that's about 20% into most deals. Now, so that's owner occupied. If it's non-owner occupied, meaning you're going to lease out more than 50% of the property to someone else, then the lender's most likely going to actually give you even less toward the purchase of that building. So in some instances, they might give you about 70% of the purchase. So on that $100,000 building purchase, they're going to give you 70% of that, which is $70,000. You're now having to come up with an extra $10,000, so a total of $30,000 toward the purchase of that building. Why is that? Well, they just feel like it's more speculative. There's more risk to the loan when you're leasing out parts of that. And that's because the lender doesn't bother to look into the tenants that you're taking on and see how financially strong they are. They're just trusting that you and that building can make the payment. So owner-occupied versus non-owner occupied. Now, the other big difference is something I just alluded to. You may have caught it, is that the building has to stand on its own. What I mean by that, if it's non-owner occupied, meaning you're leaning against the rents coming into you, they're going to take a look at that and consider that the building has to stand on its own. I've talked about that when it comes to a business itself that's getting a business loan. The same is true for speculative rental real estate loans. The lender wants to see that the property can stand on its own. If you have an existing leasee that's in there that you're going to inherit, they're going to take a look at that lease and see what kind of payments are coming in. They're going to offset that against the proposed loan payment that you're going to have. And they want to make sure that that rent that's getting paid to you can make that payment. That's what we mean by stand on its own. The rent, the building itself, the rent that you collect as the landlord can make the payment on that loan without using any cash flow that you may have outside of that rental property. So the building needs to stand on its own for it to be a good deal. So those are just two big things that you need to think about when we're talking about speculative real estate loans for rental properties. Is it owner occupied? Is it non-owner occupied? And will the building be able to stand on its own? Hope that information helps you. Next up, we'll talk about speculative real estate loans when it comes to development loans and construction loans. We'll talk about that on Wednesday. Take care. See you later.